It began as just another televised political debate, a flashy, tension-filled night of back and forth sparring between left and right. The studio was packed, the lights were hot, and millions watched from home, expecting the usual rhetoric and chest thumping. Donald Trump, unbothered and arrogant as ever, took his seat at the center, soaking in the applause from his loyal supporters. But what no one predicted was that this night would unravel into chaos, because seated opposite him was Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, and she was ready for war. The segment kicked off with the topic of immigration, a subject Trump relished. With a theatrical scoff, he leaned toward his microphone. "Under my leadership," he began, "we had the strongest border security in history. But the Democrats want an open border. They want criminals, drug dealers, and terrorists flooding our streets." "Let's get real," Jasmine interrupted, her voice sharp and deliberate. "You're not talking about policy. You're spewing hate. What you want is fear. You use immigrants as a scapegoat because it's easier than offering real solutions." Trump's expression soured. His lips curled into a grin that didn't reach his eyes. "You don't know what you're talking about," he snapped. "You're just another radical Democrat who wants to destroy the country." Jasmine didn't blink. "And you're a man who talks tough about immigration while conveniently forgetting who sleeps in your bed." The audience went quiet. Trump squinted, unsure if he heard her correctly. "Excuse me, I said," Jasmine repeated, each word slicing like a dagger, "you're married to a migrant. You rail against people who come here for a better life, but you married someone who did exactly that. So if you really believe in your own rhetoric, maybe you should start at home." Gasps rippled through the studio. A producer's voice could be heard faintly in the background, panicking in the control room. The moderator glanced nervously at his cue cards, clearly unsure of how to steer the ship. But Jasmine wasn't finished. "Melania Trump came here on an EB-1 visa, the so-called Einstein visa," she said. "A visa meant for people with extraordinary ability. Now, maybe you think runway modeling is Nobel-level genius, but the rest of America has questions." Trump sat up, his face a strange mix of rage and disbelief. "How dare you talk about my wife like that?" he growled. "I'm not insulting her," Jasmine said coolly. "I'm pointing out your hypocrisy. You demonize immigrants when it's convenient. But when it comes to your own family, the rules don't apply. So tell me, should we deport your migrant wife, too? Or is she the good kind of immigrant?" The words hit like a freight train. Trump's face turned beet red. He slammed his hand on the desk, sending his water bottle flying. "Don't you talk about Melania. She's a legal immigrant. She's an American citizen." Jasmine didn't flinch. She leaned in slightly, her tone calm but deadly. "Legal, yes. But you've tried to strip that same legality from thousands of others. Dreamers. Mothers. People who've worked and paid taxes here for decades. You call them invaders, but Melania married into a passport and now she's untouchable." Trump rose from his seat, gesturing wildly, his voice louder and more desperate. "This is disgusting. You're a disgrace. And you're a hypocrite," Jasmine fired back. "You built your campaign on walls and bans, but your own wife's immigration story doesn't hold up to your standards. That's not just irony, it's cowardice." Cameras flashed. Phones recorded. The entire studio was on edge, torn between shock and awe. Moderators finally tried to interject, calling for calm, but the moment had already ignited a firestorm. Trump pointed a trembling finger at Crockett, shouting something unintelligible before storming off set, mic still hot. His voice trailed behind him as he vanished backstage, barking orders at aides. Crockett remained seated, unfazed, almost serene. She adjusted her blazer, folded her hands, and glanced at the crowd. "If we're going to talk immigration, let's talk about all of it," she said simply. The audience burst into applause. Outside, the internet had already exploded. Hashtags like hashtag Deport Your Migrant Wife and hashtag Einsteinvisa began trending. Clips of the exchange hit Twitter, TikTok, and YouTube within minutes, racking up millions of views. Jasmine's name surged on Google. Trump's team scrambled into damage control. But the damage was done. The curtain had been pulled back, and for once, the king of outrage had no comeback. Only silence. The fallout was immediate and relentless. Within hours of the now infamous showdown, every news outlet, podcast, and social media account was ablaze with commentary, memes, and theories. Jasmine Crockett hadn't just embarrassed Donald Trump, she had punctured a bubble that even his harshest critics had danced around for years: the glaring contradiction of his anti-immigrant crusade and his marriage to an immigrant. At Mar-a-Lago, the atmosphere was reportedly chaotic. Melania Trump, who usually kept a cool and distant public persona, was said to be livid. According to a source close to the former First Lady, she had locked herself in her private suite, refusing to speak to anyone for hours. A dinner with top GOP donors had been cut short when a senator made a clumsy joke about visa renewals, prompting Melania to leave the room in stony silence. Word spread fast. The irony was undeniable. Trump had spent years vilifying immigrants, but now it was his wife's immigration status under the microscope, and the scrutiny was only intensifying. Meanwhile, Jasmine Crockett wasted no time in keeping the momentum going. She posted a fiery video on her social media platforms, standing alongside several DACA recipients and immigrant activists in front of the Capitol. With poise and precision, she tore into the heart of Trump's hypocrisy. "We're not going to sit quietly while a man who built his brand on fear and division gets a free pass for the choices in his own home," she declared. If Melania Trump is beyond questioning, then every immigrant mother, father, and child should be too. You can't make immigration a crime when poor people do it and a virtue when your wife does. The video went viral. In less than 24 hours, it had over 15 million views on Instagram alone. Hashtags like hashtag visaprivilege, hashtag geniusforwo, and hashtag melaniafiles surged. Immigration attorneys began appearing on television, dissecting the EB-1 visa process and questioning how a Slovenian model with no major awards or global acclaim had secured a spot typically reserved for Nobel Prize winners, world-class scientists, or Olympic athletes. The pressure on Trump's camp was mounting. When asked by reporters to provide documentation about Melania's visa history, Trump's spokesperson dodged. The First Lady followed all legal processes, he insisted, and any attack on her is rooted in jealousy and leftist propaganda. But the deflection only fueled more questions. If she followed all the rules, why were the records sealed? Why not release them and put the controversy to rest? That's when the whispers became shouts. Investigative journalists began digging deeper. Old interviews resurfaced where Melania gave conflicting timelines about her work in the U.S. prior to getting her visa. A 1996 photoshoot done while she was allegedly still on a tourist visa drew new attention. Had she worked illegally in the U.S. before getting her green card? If so, that would mean she broke the same laws Trump claimed were ruining America. Back on Capitol Hill, Republicans scrambled to spin the story. Some called Crockett's comments below the belt, accusing her of launching a personal attack. But even some within the party admitted, off record, that she had a point. The inconsistency was becoming too glaring to ignore. Crockett, for her part, kept it strategic. She didn't make it personal, she made it political. "This isn't about Melania," she said during a CNN interview. "This is about the double standards in our immigration system. It's about who gets compassion and who gets cages. Who gets married in gold palaces and who gets deported at 3 a.m. with their kids still in pajamas." The American public, especially immigrant communities, rallied behind her. For years, people had lived in fear of deportation, seen their families torn apart, and watched Trump spin xenophobia into applause lines. Now, someone had flipped the script. For Trump, the damage was deeper than a PR scandal. It was personal. He had always controlled the narrative, dictating who was American enough, who was worthy, who deserved a future here. Now, that control was slipping. Every time he barked about border walls or anchor babies, people countered with a meme of Melania holding her naturalization certificate. And every time he appeared on camera, the words, "Deport your migrant wife," hung in the air like a thundercloud. Privately, Trump ranted that Crockett was disrespectful, vile, and a nobody. But the truth was, she had landed a punch he never saw coming, and worse, one he couldn't fight back against without drawing more attention to the very thing he wanted to bury. In living rooms across America, people who had felt invisible suddenly saw someone speak their truth. Not just about immigration, but about justice. About fairness. About how the powerful rewrite the rules for themselves while holding others to the fire. And for once, the man who branded himself as invincible was left rattled, red-faced, and running, not from a courtroom, not from a scandal, but from the truth. Delivered by Jasmine Crockett. Live and unfiltered.